We're gonna call together the co-curricular committee meeting. And we'll start with the Katie's probably on her way. I need to approve the agenda.
I can just move the agenda around and
Sure.
can do after the public comments, if we can just do all the co-curricular considerations.
Okay.
So some of us can get to our administrative cabinet meeting, and I think that that'll also address some of the folks who are in the audience here today. And then we can come back to the co-curricular report with Nick and the other items.
I'll approve that agenda with that adjustment.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay. Nope.
So the first one that we have for our co-curricular considerations, oh, we have public comments first.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. Come on, right next to me. And
Good morning.
My name is Heather Murray. Most of you don't know me. My son Cameron is a senior this year at the high school. He is autistic and disabled. And last spring, the autism consultant for the district came to observe Cameron for the day. And when she came to sit down with us or with me and the teachers, she said he loves coming to school. He's happy, but no one talks to him and no one interacts with him. So I came and sat down with Tiffany and brought her this group that I had learned about. Because I do think that it would not only benefit the kiddos in the Kokopelli group, or however you want to label them, but also the regular high school kiddos. And I'm hoping that this group would pull some of them together to make some more relationships in the high school.
So just for clarification for the board members, you're talking about the best part.
Yes, sorry.
That's all right.
And is that how you're gonna go for it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. that group.
Awesome.
Great.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, don't be stressed. Small group.
Stress.
We're just all waking up.
Yes.
Mr. Burrell's not awake yet, so you're good.
Since 4:45.
My name is Ellery Davis. I'm a junior, and I so recently that I just joined Best Buddies, and it's been a great opportunity to like make new friends. And Ooh, this is scary. It's just a great way for me to connect with more people before I graduate, and it's people I wouldn't normally like make friends with, and it's just like a really good opportunity. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, you did well. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'll talk for a second and then I'll talk to you.
My name is Maggie Diermeyer and I'm one of the co-advisors for Best Buddies. We had Best Buddies in Sunbury when I went to high school, kind of loosely. It wasn't necessarily a club, but I knew of it, but I didn't participate in it because I had a lot of other things going on in high school. But Tiffany brought Best Buddies to Sarah Dewar and I this school year and proposed it. And Sarah and I run our Future Educators Club, which was brand new last year. We had 20 kids in that last year, and we had 45 in it this year, which is pretty cool. And then we're kind of doing it a little bit in partnership so that the kids who want to go into the education field have experience working with our special ed population, but then have expanded it to the high school in general. And I would say it's like a 75% future educators, 25% general population of the high school. Of our Best Buddies kind of makeup, I guess is the right term. But the first week we had 18 kids, I think, total because of scheduling. And last week there was like standing room only. They made holiday cards, they did friendship bracelets, played games. And it was just like really cool conversations and seeing how they were asking each other questions. I've seen kids talking to each other a little bit more in the hallways. And that's only been 2 weeks. So we were only gonna do it once every month. And then I said that to one of our kiddos and he's like, once a month, seriously? Like, this is every week. I'm like, okay. So the kids want to be requested every Friday. If they have something else that they're requested for during contact time, which is our main meeting time, then they know that they can come after they finish a test or whatever. But it's just been really positive and they're coming up with their own ideas of what they want to do. We want to do some different outings as well, but the conversations I think is the coolest part after 2 weeks. Like, I'm just very thankful that you guys both brought it to us. I think it's been really powerful and a good way to start our Fridays. So, thank you for considering.
You.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Here with me running with the rest of you.
Sure, go ahead.
All right, I think Tiffany, the first two are yours, actually, the Adaptive Sports League and Best Buddies. I think you have some things that Rebecca's pulled together. These are a little bit different than some of the other clubs you're going to be seeing, because these are ones that are being brought forward by administration. And part of what we're going to request is from the onset for it to have funding behind it for the advisors. We think it's something that's good programmatically, as the public comments folks spoke to. Some of the other clubs you'll see are ones that are more interest level things that are brought from students or some up and from those groups, and they have to show some viability. But the other ones we feel we have some programmatic input into, so we'd like to make sure that they're moving forward, because I think they have an impact on school, as you heard in the public comments.
Is it okay if I start with Best Buddies? Since
You
they
can
just-
go with, yeah, absolutely.
I just put a really short summary together of basically what you have in your packet already, but just kind of overview. Best Buddies is actually an international organization, so we would join. There's, of course, just like many other organizations, there's state level organizations, local organizations, so we would join. We haven't done that yet, but we would like to join like the official organization. That way they have conferences, they have other information that they'll kind of feed us ideas for activities. So we'll actually join that formal organization to be part of it. So this is just their kind of from their website. It's the world's largest organization dedicated to ending the social, physical, and economic isolation of the 200 million people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So the goal is to empower students with disabilities by helping them form meaningful relationships with peers, as well as improving their self-advocacy and communication skills. If you see their website, they also have chapters on college campuses. They do some work placement things. So we're just looking at the high school piece, even though they have a lot of different other categories of service for their organization too. Objectives, and again, this is mostly in your handout, but promoting just like the students and teacher and parents already spoke to, but we want to promote inclusivity and build some of those relationships. I was just observing in a Phi Ed class last week at the middle school and was observing our adaptive PE teacher working with some students in class. And I would say out of the whole class, there were two regular ed students that interacted frequently with that student. And so just the whole idea of how do we continue to build the idea of all students being included, and encouraging social interaction. If, again, just like our student said, these aren't students I would normally be interacting with and talking with and building a relationship with. So developing empathy and understanding, and of course, enhancing leadership skills, because another piece of Best Buddies is the students with intellectual disabilities actually take on leadership roles as well. So once they have their officers and secretary and those types of things, the goal is for students with disabilities to have some of those leadership roles, not just the regular ed students. Our implementation plan, we already introduced the program. We've already done some recruiting. We're in the process of training and kind of pairing students. And we don't necessarily pair one-to-one right now. We are trying to let kids develop relationships naturally to see kind of which pairs kind of match up as a good combination of students working together. And then the regular activities, which is what Maggie spoke to, is having kind of weekly activities, but we've also talked about bowling and dinners and movies and those types of things, because again, a lot of times our students with intellectual disabilities, they don't have the peer calling them at night saying, hey, do you want to go do this? Or do you want to go to the football game? Or do you want to? So trying to encourage some of those social connections outside of the school day is really important too. So cost, this, Brian just gave me this kind of range. Really, the only cost is the advisor position. And we do have 2 people that are interested in being co-advisors, so it's actually this amount split between 2 people, because it's still considered one position to split between 2 people. So that's really the only cost. The other, like materials and transportation and some of those things would come out of special ed budget, so it's not something that would be coming out of the athletic budget or extracurricular other budget. So we would cover the rest. What we've done so far, and this again, our public input kind of spoke to these things as well. Planned our first 2 to 3 meetings, so kind of gives you an idea. And these are just a few pictures of the first few weeks of getting together during contact time. And we might have to move to a larger space if we have a larger number of kids, which is kind of exciting. And a couple more pictures. And then just some quotes from students about what they've enjoyed so far in terms of being part of this group, so.
So when did you start this up? In the fall?
We started talking about it in like September, October, but they didn't have a first meeting until December.
Okay.
So they had just had 2 meetings so far on Fridays, or activity times on Fridays. And then our next steps, we want to continue meetings and then planning some community events, bowling, dinner outings, movies, attending high school sponsored events, and hopefully building lasting friendships. So those are our next steps. And just thank you for considering this as another organization.
I think what we're looking for here today is a recommendation then to take it to the full board in January. And this would be one approving the club officially of the organization. And then also we're asking for the advisors pay as Tiffany outlined.
I probably recommend moving this to the full board in January.
I second it. Everybody want to vote on that? All in favor, say. Aye.
Judy was separate.
Okay, thank you, Judy. You got it. I'm sorry.
Well, I think that would be the next one. I
Yeah.
think.
All right, sounds good. Okay, well, the next one is a different proposal. So it's an adapted sports league proposal. And I thought I would just share this short video with you from Sun Prairie, because Sun Prairie really reached out to us and they're trying to get an adaptive sports league going in Dane County so that they have other schools to participate with. And this will kind of outline their program and why they developed it, and essentially the same reasons that we want to develop an adaptive sports league here in Waunakee too. Let's see if I can get back to the beginning.
It helps me meeting new people and understanding the world.
Share my old sentiments, my old coaching side, so in soccer, so pretty good, actually, nice.
I'm a coach for softball, and I believe all kids should have the opportunities to play high school sports. It also gives the rest of our student body an opportunity to see those kids in action and doing things and encourage them and just understand that all people should be accepted and should play sports.
So Adaptive Sports League was born out of some visioning work that we were doing as an adaptive PE team. We did a gap analysis and noticed that our biggest gap was in the area of extracurricular opportunities that were inclusive and meaningful for students with disabilities. We felt really good about opportunities that we had for early childhood students. We felt really good about the opportunities that existed in elementary and middle school students, but when it came down to high school, there was really no high school sport opportunity that our students with significant support needs could really participate in.
We actually know some people that started in the lacrosse area, and they encouraged us to get it going here. This has been a 7-year process that we have just been working on and just trying to find the right time. And it kind of was a perfect opportunity when we split into 2 schools, because we knew, at least in this area, we'd have each other to play against. They get to be a student athlete, get to be socialized throughout the school, saying I'm playing in a game tonight. Kids get to play against their peers and have fun. A lot of social perks with playing a sport.
Excitement on their faces and the excitement for them to be there, the opportunity to compete and to have a high school sport that they can authentically participate in means so much to them. Community, camaraderie, the support that's been provided by the other teams, the volleyball teams, the football teams came and supported the adaptive sports league sports.
For the future of ASL, we really hope that all the teams in our conference area adopt the program and that our teams are not just playing against East and West. They can too experience traveling outside the district and meeting other players that they play against and benefiting both ways.
We would just really love to have more schools in the area. It's such a great opportunity for all of our kids, and it's just been so rewarding for us, and I think it'd be so rewarding for every other school. Reach out to us and we will help.
I just like playing on a team, helping my teammates. I like scoring goals.
It's really fun, kind of thing. Anyone else who would be interested in it should do it as fun.
Right, you hit escape for me. Thank you. That just gives you kind of a short overview of what adaptive sports is, and I'll kind of go through the three different sports that we're considering and how it would be structured as well. So this is kind of our overall objective, is just to provide students with disabilities an inclusive and enriching high school sports experience. Many of these students currently face barriers to obviously participating in some of our traditional sports programs because they might need a lot more support than could be provided in a traditional sport. And we're trying to, again, as the director from Sun Prairie talked about, like to address this gap in opportunity for high school students. So, and obviously to grow a sense of community, teamwork, and personal growth as well. Again, inclusive participation is a part of the program. Also professional guidance, so our physical therapists, our adaptive PE staff would all be involved in like, how can we best support our students? You probably saw the one student in the wheelchair in Sun Prairie who had kind of a contraption on the front of his wheelchair. So those are the types of things we have to develop to determine how can we really make sure each student can participate based on their own abilities. So that's where we would bring in our physical therapists and our adaptive PE folks to help us develop some of those things. And then obviously community engagement. So having other, us reaching out to the head coaches of football and basketball, baseball, all those things to let them know that, their students can come support these students as well as they're competing. So so the three different sports, and this is the three sports that Sun Prairie offers as well, is indoor soccer in the fall, floor hockey in the winter, and indoor wiffle ball in the spring. And you'll notice the seasons are really short. So what Sun Prairie does is they have 1 week where they just have multiple practices. So the first week, and then they have 5 weeks where they have 1 practice and 1 competition. So, and it's 5 weeks after that. So they're relatively short seasons. It's not like a winter basketball season where you're going from November to March. They're pretty succinct seasons. And I know Nick and we've talked a little bit about, facilities and reserving facilities and how that might be a little bit challenging, but I talked with Sun Prairie about that as well. And they said they sit down in the summer and try and sketch out, okay, there's no basketball or wrestling at Waunakee High School on this day. We're going to pick this day for our home match, so trying to work that out, I know can be a little bit tricky. So those are the 3 seasons that we would look at. And then this is just our timeline. This was in your packet as well, but just beginning of this year, researching Adaptive Sports League. I did go to Sun Prairie's one of their soccer games and observed one of their soccer games, which was super fun. And got to see that, and then also met with the adaptive PE staff from Sun Prairie and just talked with them about, what were your steps? How did you work this through your board? How do you work the funding? All of those types of things. So we've just been doing research. And then the goal is to work with the co-curricular committee and full board in terms of approving our proposal and then hopefully implementing in the fall. So in the spring, we'd really be looking at distributing promotional materials, recruiting families, recruiting students, purchasing materials, all of those types of things. And then again, continuing to promote over the summer so that we have students. We have about The goal is to have about 10 students on each team, so not a huge number of kids, about 10 students on each team. For each one, we could have more or we could have less, kind of depending. The one thing we're still talking about is, you know, if we didn't have enough students that were just at the high school, would we include our transition program students, which are students that are 18 to 21 years old and working over at TLC, and a lot of them are doing like community-based job development and some of those things. So that's something we're still talking a little bit about. Sun Prairie does not include their transition students, but they're much larger than us, so they may have more students to pick from. So that's something we're still discussing a little bit, haven't finalized yet. Budget, these are really estimates, and this is where Nick and I and HR can work more on specific, really nailing down the specific numbers, but so these are just estimates, but so out of the special education budget, equipment for the first year. So again, a lot of the purchases after the first year, so for example, soccer, there's some big padded kind of walls that they put around so the balls aren't going outside of the enclosure. So there's a few things like that that would be costly that I would take out of the special ed budget for that first year. And then that's something that you would have year after year until it wears out, obviously. Transportation would also be covered by special ed. Again, this was just a guess looking at if we had a total of 9 away games, and I estimated like $400 per time. So again, just trying to throw some numbers together. And then jerseys as well would come out of special education. So then the collaboration piece, it would be part of, what I'm hoping for is to collaborate with Nick around the coaches, scorekeepers, and referees. And again, scorekeepers and referees, we only pay for when we have a home match. So it's about half of the time. So again, I estimated if we had 3 home, matches, which we could end up having 2 or 3, in each season, we'd have about 9 events. So I just estimated that at $20 an hour, $30 an hour for referees. The referees is interesting because I did talk with the coaches at Sun Prairie after the game, and I said, okay, how do you work with your referees? Because obviously you don't strictly follow every single rule. And they said, yeah, we all meet at the beginning of the season and we kind of talk through like what we really want the kids to understand and like what types of structures we want to put in place. So that it does require a little bit of special. It's not just a random referee that can come in. And for Sun Prairie, they said a lot of their special ed teachers or Phi Ed teachers come in and do that piece. So so that part's a little bit tricky, but we'd have to talk through. So, and the coaches, this one, again, I'll have to go back to HR on this. From my perspective, I compared the pay level with like middle school sports because middle school has much shorter seasons. So in my mind, I'm thinking like, I think it equates better to like a middle school. I don't know, is football even like, is it 8 or 10 weeks at middle school? I don't even know. 10, so it's even shorter than that. So that was why that I picked that range. I kind of looked at like an assistant middle school position and what the range would be because it's such a short season. But Brian can certainly chime in on what he thinks would be most appropriate. But obviously we'd have to pay those coaches for each season. So that's just, again, estimates as we move forward, but we have more detailed information once we kind of sit down and go through where we think, especially the coaching piece, where we think that might fall on the pay schedule. And then long-term goals for this program is just to have enough teams in our area to actually have a conference. And then Sun Prairie had said that eventually they'd love for the WIA to recognize this league and to maybe even have like a state tournament structure. But again, that's probably 3, 4, 5 years down the road. But that would be a great, next step for adaptive sports in our area. I have heard that all 4 Madison schools or high schools are planning to jump in next year and possibly 2 other Dane County schools. So our hope is that we would have at least, 5 or 6 different school districts in the area that we could work with on creating schedules and having competitions and things too. So.
I think it sounds like a lot of fun planning all this.
Yeah, there are a lot of details for sure. I don't know, obviously that's why we're taking a whole year to dig into all the different pieces and figure out how it would work best and start next year. You'll notice too, that even the fall sport, we start in like October. So it's not like an August 1st, like football or something, it starts much later. So the kids are settled and in their routine and and comfortable at school before we add that after school.
Do you have a sense that there are kids who are waiting to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think we'll have any problem, at least for the next several years, having like 8 to 10 kids that are interested. And again, after that, it just all depends on which kids are coming up and which students are most interested. But I'd say we generally have at least 10 students at the high school that would kind of fit the bill for this piece. And I know one question someone else asked me was, there is Special Olympics and there is Paralympics. Paralympics is specifically for people with physical disabilities only, and Special Olympics is really just for people with intellectual disabilities. And this is kind of a mixture, like any student that has a 504 or a IEP or a 504 that has a disability can participate in this league. So it's not like there's only students with intellectual disabilities participate. It's really open to any student with a disability.
One of the things I like about it is it gives those kids a connection to their school. They
Yeah.
represent their school. I think that's the part. This is also, I think, this is the difference between Special Olympics goes from like upper elementary all the way through adults. And that's definitely a community-based piece, and I think this supplements kind of what that is, and it gives the kids a great connection to school. So I think it's a great option. I think it's awesome that our area is looking to incorporate it. And I think the pieces that we talked through were the intersection with Special Olympics, which Tiffany already talked about, gym availability, which is just a scheduling piece. I know Nick has been part with, but I think we can find that out, particularly as we're adding schools here. We're going to be adding larger gyms. We'll have opportunities where we can spread different things around. I see it as a school activity, so it's going to take precedent over some of like, let's use BDL basketball, for example. It'll take precedent over that, so we can get some more preferential gym time as opposed to the community utilizing it. So I think it's a great option. I think it's pretty exciting. So, I mean, from this perspective, you're looking to start it in the fall. Is that right, Tiffany?
Next fall.
So I think what we're looking at here is an endorsement of this committee, then take it to the board, and then it would actually roll into kind of our first draft of our budget for next year. And we can kind of outline then how that gets paid for, and that'll be something that'll be part of them, kind of your budget and this budget going forward.
Quick comment or question, I think it's great, I'm in 100% support, but as these kids are now becoming in a competitive league, would they be up for drug testing? Would they have to follow the co-curricular handbook? So if their attendance, it brings a different layer to the kids. And so I just want to make sure that we're thinking about the whole thing and what that looks like for them. If a kid is plugged out, it's random. We randomize it. We have kids who are in forensics or in sports that can go in for a drug test. So now we have these kids coming up for a drug test.
Yeah, I think that's
So-
something we put into our, when we meet with parents or have that initial kickoff meeting, because really, yeah, they do their sports physicals, they follow the code of conduct. I think the only thing that might be, and again, it'd be case by case basis, would be absences in terms of, a lot of times students in wheelchairs or with physical, have a lot of appointments. So that'd be the only thing I can think of that might be a little bit different on a case by case, but otherwise I think everything else should just be is standard. But I also talked to some Prairie, they said they do, students do letter, they get a varsity letter from their sport. And so I think all of those things should apply to this league too. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just making sure the parents understand that at the get-go so that they know to expect that if it comes up. So, yeah.
Well, I move that we support this league and we move it on to the full board.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
So I guess we're moving on to the investment club.
Right. Investment Club is actually a new club. Aaron McDonough has brought that one forward. Can I have you just bring up the proposal there, Rebecca, please? And I think what they're looking for is something very similar to a lot of our other clubs. It's the one that's being brought forward by our student body. They have found somebody who is interested in hosting that, and Aaron, who is our economics instructor at the high school. I think as you scroll down a little bit, Rebecca, you can see kind of the budget up right there, thank you. 'Cause that's the piece from a budget standpoint, so the district's not being, there's no money being requested. You're not requesting advisor pay, and there's no need for booster club funding. So I think it's a group that's talking about investment. They're meeting during their time at school and seeking to just have official recognition as a club. I think they've actually started to look to kind of gather. And they have quite a few kids who are interested in looking at investment.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Car Enthusiast Club.
All right, this is very similar. This is one that I believe has come forward as an interest. From students who are interested, obviously, in cars, very similar type thing, I think. Mike Schaefer, the one doing that?
Yeah, Mike Schaefer.
Mike Schaefer,
Yeah.
yep. And you can kind of scroll down to the same thing. It's very similar. They're not asking for any funds. They're not asking for a paid advisor, and they're not asking for any additional funding. They're just looking to meet once a month to talk about cars over coffee. And I think it's just a great place for you. I think the purpose for a lot of these clubs at our school, which is why it's just kind of creating those connections in those spaces for kids to connect on things that are of interest to them. And this is an area that has risen, and they're requesting to be able to be more formally organized as a club.
So these clubs don't have to meet at school.
They usually do, no, they probably,
Most clubs meet during contact time.
Well, this says meet every Sunday,
Clubs can meet,
anytime,
their clubs that meet outside school.
okay?
well, it was, there's two.
I think it's awesome that we're bringing forth all these opportunities for kids to get involved. Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And reinstatement of the middle school ukulele club.
These are two that are actually, so if you recall back, when we went through all of our policies in the 300 series, I believe, we were talking about kind of approval of student clubs and student organizations. And I told the board at that time that we're in a transition period. So this is hopefully the end of our transition for like those clubs that are requesting pay. So what you will see is moving forward, any new club proposals that are at the point of where they will see where they qualify for compensation for their advisors. Those will come during our budget process in the spring. However, there are some that are still lingering out there from our old process, and these are two of them. So the first one is they want to take the ukulele club, rename it the middle school chamber orchestra, and request pay for the advisor. Brian Kabarski and I took a look at the history of this. It definitely got started. We had a bit of COVID interruption, then it was started again. And I think what they're trying to do is just reimagine the club, rename it, but continue it moving forward. There's definitely kids who are involved in wanting to be part of this and continue to be part of it. So our recommendation after reviewing it is to approve it with the paid advisor piece, the paid advisor piece being effective upon approval by the board.
So the old ukulele name was just a fun thing to call it that.
I think that's where it started from. I think some of the chamber music that they've had, they've also incorporated the ukulele, and I think that was the way that they were starting the club.
Okay.
So I think it's still a similar type of music, they're just changing, I guess, more formally what the name of it is. Brian and I, this is middle school, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, it's not yours. Yeah, but.
It's first time I'm here.
Yeah, Brian Grabarski and I kind of looked at it and we saw that the tracking of what was happening there we felt was legitimate. And it's just simply changing. Really what we're doing is we're asking for pay for now a club that has found itself to be viable. And in the process, we are changing the name.
Can you remind me what our policy is? Is it 3 years established, 3 years?
Correct.
And then
a certain number, do we have to
have
have?
a certain amount of participation or not?
We don't really have a participation number. It's kind of a subjective number to make sure that it's viable and that it is continuing and it is moving forward.
And they are meeting.
Yeah, and that they are continuing, that's, so as we kind of looked at those pieces, we felt that it did fit that.
And so that this is kind of getting rid of that timeline, you're saying the club existed, so it's kind of just.
This is actually a club that's saying we've existed for 3 years. Now we would like compensation for the advisory position. And so that's really what the request is.
And you feel the scope hasn't changed at all, really?
No, as Brian and I took a look at it, we felt that it was very much still within the same scope of what their intent was. They had a little bit of interruption there with COVID, but they've also had changeover of a teacher who started it, left, and then other people that picked it up. And I think it went for a year as we came back out of the pandemic where it wasn't active, but it's been picked up since then. So I think that's, as we looked at it, we felt that it was an established club. It just had the pandemic hiatus, and now we're kind of reinstating it more formally with a new name. But we felt that it did qualify for the pay and the compensation moving forward. We didn't feel it was fair to have them start over with that just because we had a change in staff number.
So we're just looking for a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aviation Club, request for a paid advisor.
Aviation club's very similar. I think this is one Brian can probably speak to a little bit, but this is one that I think's been in
Yeah.
activity for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And it's relatively popular and started, I believe, in 2017, 18, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Rob Zisnev hasn't brought it back for compensation consideration. So that's really what this is just solely one to bring back as part of our previous policy, which was stating that you bring it back in October. We've delayed this meeting till December, so that's why you're seeing it now. This should be kind of our last batch of those that are under the old system, and then everything else will be rolling into the new one in the spring. So our recommendation is that approval for the compensation for the aviation club advising.
So Rob France is the one. Is he retiring?
End of the year.
He's retiring at the end of the year, and then we'll find someone to pick it up.
Do we ever see the ones that have disbanded, no longer are active?
I think usually what you see there is it just doesn't, we don't have an advisor, the club goes away.
And it's not part of the budget.
No, and then nobody's getting paid for it, so there are occasionally things like that. And then there's just a process that if that does come, we bring it back, and that's a little bit similar to what the one we just did with the Chamber Orchestra, the Ukulele Club. Had a hiatus, so we brought that back forward. So Aviation Club would be one that has been established. Our hope would be to have somebody pick it up in the future. And if not, it's still an approved club, and then we can institute that. But Mr. France does a nice job with it, and it does qualify for our process for compensation for the advisor.
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to our WIA co-op renewal for gymnastics and girls hockey.
We'll actually probably jump up to the top because I skipped the first
Okay,
one.
sorry.
So we can. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jump out because I have our administrative cabinet meeting starting here soon, so. I think Nick's gonna be able to take over the co-curricular report and then talk about the renewal for the gymnastics and hockey, which we'll recommend to the board for approval. To keep those going forward, and then just a wrestling update, so. I'll let you work directly with Nick, and he can kind of walk you through the rest of the items.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am going to start with the actual summary attachments, so the 23, 24. Fall athletic participation summary. I didn't want to just go over the report itself. I don't know what had been done in the past. I kind of hinted at this at the last co-curricular meeting, so I have that there. That's an attachment. If you have any questions, we can certainly go through that. And I wanted to summarize some of the pieces in the actual slides here for the summary. Meeting with Katie, we kind of talked about showing a trend line of the last few years for participation in UPA and just other information, so it wasn't just what happened this fall. So some of the things that we highlighted there was the participation numbers or percentages for both the high school and the middle school. Trying to see on that screen, but the fall girls swim and girls tennis had the highest GPA. Nicole Carroll and I are working with Infinite Campus to try and show like what the average GPA of a non-club or athletic participant would have versus somebody that's involved in a club or activity. Right now it would literally be hand doing math for all 700 plus kids that did something this fall to try and figure that out, just because there's not a good way for Infinite Campus to run that. So they're working on that. This is certainly a super strong percentage, maybe like 48% basically of the high school students are involved in athletics. This was just category A. So this didn't include, for example, like the aviation club and those school-based clubs. Can certainly look at putting those numbers into this as well. But for the purposes of this report, what I had seen done in the past, it was focused primarily in category A. So that's the way I kept it. Again, completely open and moving this, we're changing it moving forward.
What did you say? What percentage is involved in?
47.9.
Is that from where? Oh, I'm on the wrong report.
At the high school, and it's almost
Okay.
the exact same at the middle school. So,
Okay, sorry.
no. Just looking at the combined participation for both schools, it's going up. Probably no surprise to anybody in here. It's a big jump though, when you look at the 21-22 school years and 22-23. Quick math tells me it's 39 kids, and then this year was almost a jump of 100. So, again, it's not like we're gonna talk about wrestling here in 6th grade. It's not like any grade was added to boost that number. There's just a lot more kids participating. So for example, in middle school volleyball, we had 8 different teams for 7th and 8th grade. For boys basketball at the middle school in winter right now, we're at 5 different teams. So it's definitely a good problem to have, if you want to call it a problem.
Yeah.
It does involve finding some coaches in the late stages of the game. For example, we needed to find a 3rd coach for the middle school basketball season. Luckily, we had somebody available for that. So participation was really, really good. It's certainly high in the sports that you'd expect it to be. Like nationally, you look at volleyball, participation numbers continue to increase, and that's certainly true for both our middle school and our high school program when you look at that sport in particular. Football also continues to kind of defy the odds in terms of participation, where a lot of schools are seeing a decline in that. They have the numbers sitting at 168 this year, which is up 8 from last year. That's pretty impressive too. So I credit the coaches for recruiting. I credit the parents and the boosters for being involved and making sure all those opportunities are there in the program. So that way it's something that people can value, whether they are playing a lot or they're not playing a lot. There's some tangible benefit to being involved in some of these teams. So those numbers continue to increase. I put the highlights in there. Again, these were just focused on like WIA sports in here. So this isn't to say mountain biking didn't have any achievements, or for example, the equestrian club did very well at state as well. But I just kept it to WIA on this slide, just because that information is a little more accessible to broadcast. Some of these smaller organizations, kind of like when I put the academic achievements of some of the students, some of those coaches associations are really strong and they really push that to their members to make sure they nominate kids. Some don't as much. So that's where you see, we'll get to the academic achievements where football and volleyball and girls golf, I believe it was, they kind of push that to their members. So they got a little more notoriety. So that's kind of why you see the disparity in some sports over others. It's not that, hey, we like the sport over the other. It's just that some of their associations are a lot stronger and they really push those academic achievements as well as the athletic ones.
If we jump back to participation, like you mentioned in middle school, you were able to find a coach. If you weren't so fortunate to find a coach, are we looking at cutting ever?
No, so our middle school policy says we can't cut. So we would essentially have to come up with like so the other schools in the conference have like an A, B, and a C team. So we just would have had to reorganize that. The same coach essentially would have had 2 teams. Would have practiced together all season long, but it would have been All right, we're at Beaver Dam on Monday, we're at Sun Prairie on Thursday. A is going to Beaver Dam on Monday, B is going to Sun Prairie on Thursday. So it just would have been a little bit more creative, or we would have had to be more creative in trying to find games. It would have been, all right, I'm signing up for middle school basketball, I'm not gonna get 10 games now, I'm probably gonna get 5 or 6, depending on how we would break that schedule up. So there'd still be an opportunity, it'd just be less games. We do try to add games when it's possible. So Sun Prairie, again, for example, they have a lot of different teams. Sometimes we're able to add one-offs if we do have that situation where there's 3 different teams and we need to add games to the schedule. Adding games that late can be challenging for a space consideration, but more so for officials, especially with 4:15 starts for middle school games. That's pretty early for some officials to get there by 4 o'clock and get that much done. Just kind of looking ahead, and I did keep this to fall. I know we talked about this a little bit at the beginning. Football is unique because it's the only sport that doesn't include every single school in the playoffs. So, you know, when you're going into the swim season, for example, you know exactly what division you're going to be in. You know exactly who's in your division. In football, you don't know that because the exact number is 200 some teams that make state football playoffs. Then the divisions are adjusted and determined after that's been made. Where Waunakee's enrollment sets with the last couple of years, as you know, we've sat right on that D1, D2 line, depending on who makes it in the playoffs. So this year we were Division 2, last year we were Division 1. Next year it's pretty conceivable to say that with the, I think it was up 33, the enrollment, that we would be right there at the Division 1 line anyway. We are going to be Division 1 in football because of the success factor that the WIA has implemented starting next year. So that got approved back in April at the WIA annual meeting. You basically accumulate points with how successful you are. So it's sectional appearances. It depends on which sport it is. Sectional appearances, state appearances, a state championship. They earn you a certain amount of points. And so the WIA is taking this year, last year, and the year before, and you add your points together, and it can bump you up a division if you've accumulated enough of those points. Football has done that. So is volleyball, but volleyball is already Division 1, so there's no higher place to go. You can appeal being moved up a division, except in football. They say if you're one of the good enough, one of the programs that's good enough to make the field in football, because it's unique, you have to win a certain amount of games to get in, you don't have the ability to peel back down. You do in some of the other sports. So for example, let's just say if volleyball was Division 2 and they got moved up to Division 1, we could appeal. I don't know if anybody's seen, but some of the appeals that have been made in the last couple of weeks have gone public and they've almost all been denied at some point. It's going to be a trial and error process because it's the first year that this is going on. You know, there's a lot of people that I think misunderstand divisions. They think it's how good you are. That's the division you're in. It has nothing, now it has something to do with that, but it used to not. It used to be strictly just based on enrollment. So football was prepared for this in conversations. They knew this was coming. They know they'll have to make adjustments now because now you are going to play the Kimberleys and some of the other larger schools. But again, we were right there on that cut line. So this was always a possibility. And now we're entrenched in that. Are there any questions on that? Because I know it's kind of a big concept to talk about. It's
the concept will apply to all sports though.
all sports. The only thing they're not applying it to is track. It's not cross country, the other one. It's track and tennis, so they can't, and it's just because those are unique the way they're grouped. So track, you could be at a school of 80 kids, but 75 of the kids are in track. So it's kind of, it usually doesn't equate that way when you look at other sports, basketball, football, swimming, and things like that. So that way there's no movement in those sports. There hasn't been talk of adding that either. So cross country is one of those sports. So you could have, if your boys program is very good and is accumulated points, your boys program could be D1 and your girls program D2. And there are a couple of schools in that situation, which impacts coaches because those coaches are usually sharing coaching staff. So somebody's going to this sectional meet on a Saturday and your girls coach is going to this sectional meet on a Saturday. So it's definitely going to be a challenge for some of those schools right on the line. Kind of looking at enrollment though and where we're headed will be Division I in just about everything. Football is really the only question mark right now. General rule of thumb is 1,200 and above is usually Division I. That's not an exact number for all sports, but you can kind of gauge. If you're at 1,200 kids, you're going to be at Division I for most sports. No other sports would move up, like I said, because you know they're already D1 or they didn't accumulate enough points. And again, it's a 3-year running total. And then your number resets. So as part of this, and something that's been brought up to me multiple times in the last 6 months is with going up to Division I, with the amount of popularity that our weight room has, there has been a request, certainly for more space and whatever that looks like in future planning. Where if you were to go up after school in the weight room, you kind of see 70+ kids working out. It's a very well-oiled machine and it's organized very well. That's been done with the space that's given. It's definitely outgrown that space. It's a very nice weight room. Nobody's arguing that. But in terms of the groups and just kind of the people that have asked me that aren't involved in, and I'm excluding football from this, that have said, hey, what are there any general weight room hours? Really aren't, because of the lack of space up there and the amount of time that it's scheduled out exactly for the different teams and sports that are in season or out of season that have that room reserved. Part of the larger discussion too is that with Pat Rice stepping away, he's kind of been that unnamed person that's been coordinating those weight room hours and coordinating those workouts. So there's going to have to be that discussion of who is going to step up and do that. You know, whether it's a position that's separate as a weight room coordinator, whether it's part of a new PE teacher or whoever is in charge of that. That I just don't want to go past this meeting without actually mentioning it, because it is definitely something that's allowed a lot of our sports to remain competitive. And if we had that Division I route and stay in that Division I route in all sports, that weight room becomes even more important. It's kind of an out of sight, out of mind thing, but it has just as much to do with success as youth programs and things like that in order to be competitive with other schools.
What do other schools do in terms of their weight room, managing their weight room? Like, I mean, maybe that's something that would be for the next meeting.
Sure.
Other information to us about.
Generally, they have somebody that's called a weight room coordinator or supervisor. It would be either like an additional coaching stipend that would be given to a staff member already, whether it's a coach or whether it's a teacher. And they kind of handle that space scheduling. They would work on or kind of map out the workouts for each program. They work with the head coaches of those programs. So for example, let's just say if you're a swim coach, you're like, well, I don't really know what I want my athletes to do. They would approach that strength and conditioning coordinator and map out kind of a workout plan from in season to end of season and off season. Just so that kind of complete opportunity is there for a sport specific workout, but also something that applies to all sports. This isn't just like, here's my football lift, here's my tennis lift, here's my cross country lift. It would be a lift that would be benefiting you if you participated in multiple sports too. So
The space isn't in part of the high school improvement, is it? There's
No.
nothing.
not this go around, so no.
Okay.
So it's just kind of that middle figure, because I've seen it where you have each sports coach in charge of their workouts or their team's weight room time. It becomes very hodgepodge. It becomes an argument of what's the best workout, what's not. Where if you have one central figure, it's far easier to follow along with that and then see the results and to see it apply to multiple sports versus, well, football wants their time, basketball now wants their time, baseball and softball. It just kind of becomes challenging, especially if we're in that footprint that we're in for space. We need kind of that one person to oversee and facilitate the use of that.
So what would be the time frame of
Um,
need for that if that's entirely?
Yeah, so bringing that information to you certainly for the next meeting, and then looking at implementing it into the late summer, like looking at July as a soft target for that. It doesn't mean Pat's not involved in weight room now, and there's other coaches too. I'm not just saying Pat, but he's kind of delegated that responsibility to some of the other staff members that have that training for strength and conditioning to implement that for the groups that want to use it.
Is that
the combined role, is that a normal thing, like if I had a teacher?
I've seen it, if you add it on as like a coaching stipend, yes. Because it's not, you wouldn't interrupt your teaching day at all, this would be an after school, before school thing. So I've seen it as a stipend, certainly more common than just my position to manage the weight room, where that's half of my day and then teaching is the other half.
There's probably additional requirements or certifications maybe that go along
Yeah,
with that.
yeah, certainly we want to look at certifications to make sure that person's not just, well, I weightlifted in the past, so I know how to weightlift. It's following a standard and procedure. So. Just information.
I wanted to, when you said back to the whole D1 thing and it's a 3-year average and then when you mentioned it resets, how does it reset?
So let's say football doesn't make the playoffs the next 3 years, and that enrollment number gets us back to where D2 normally would fall, then you fall back to D2. So you look at your accumulation over a 3-year period. If you drop under that threshold, you're back where you should be, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It's not the easiest. You look at the points and accumulation of. You have an idea of where you're going, like in the next year. You won't all of a sudden wake up the next day and go, hey, we're back. Like you'll see it kind of coming, go, well, if we don't make level whatever this year.
You're just off that scale then. Now you're just.
Yeah. And you could bounce right back on it the next year if you win a state championship, and it jumps you up in points. So it's a year ahead of. So again, the season we just finished up in fall, you know where you're going now into fall 2024 through planning, and we might be looking at planning. So it's kind of an extra step for the coaches to know where their program is going to be in order to do non-conference scheduling to make sure the teams are prepared for the division competition that might be in the playoffs. Yeah.
And then the next, so moving on then now to the co-op renewal for gymnastics and girls hockey.
Yep, so this is pretty standard. I don't know if this group has normally approved this. It's always required a school board president's signature and the superintendent's signature. So I didn't attach the actual renewal form to this because it's now online. So that's why I'm just kind of seeking this to get moved on to the main meeting. Gymnastics is a yearly approval. It's kind of unique in that way because all other WIA co-ops are every 2 years. The deadline for it did change this year. The WIA changed all their deadlines. So the deadline for winter sports, gymnastics and hockey is February 1st. So that's why I'm bringing it to you now in hopes of approval at the January board meeting. And then I would just simply provide to Joan and Randy the signature piece of paper that I have to upload to our WIA portal.
So I'll make a motion to move this forward to our main meeting in January.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then wrestling update.
So last time we had a co-curricular meeting, we did have a couple representatives speak in favor of 6th grade middle school wrestling. You know, I said I was in favor of it too, as long as we could vet out some of the questions that we had. One of those questions was, what were other schools in our conference providing? Were they allowing 6th graders to wrestle? The overwhelming majority of schools in our conference, so 19 of them, are allowing 6th grade wrestling. 90% of those schools have 6th graders in the same building. So the only wrinkle in this is how do we get 6th graders, if they are going to partake in middle school wrestling, onto the bus for that transportation loop. So when they have their way meets or when they have practice, that they're able to get to that same location. So that's something that's really the only question mark right now that I still need to look into. It would not have any impact financially if you were to add 6th graders to the wrestling program because they would already be partaking in meets that 7th and 8th grades are going to. Wrestling is a unique sport in middle school because as a 6th grader, you could wrestle an 8th grader or a 7th grader. You're put into a weight class versus like basketball. If you're a 7th grader, you're playing 7th graders in your game. Wrestling, because of the sport growing in popularity in terms of female wrestling, we've seen 6th grade, or a lot of schools try to get 6th grade in the door for wrestling because it kind of, and in the words of the people I've talked to, allows you to capture the interest of those kids in sixth grade, where maybe they don't play basketball or some other sport because they're trying wrestling for the first time now, that it's an opportunity for them to try it. So they're going that route, they're getting hooked on wrestling, if you will, and they're continuing through their high school career. As far as sixth graders and other schools go, there's plenty of needs for them, so I know one of the questions that we talked about was whether there's a club option. So if you're a sixth grader and you want to wrestle, why don't you just go the club route? This is a little bit more formal because you're playing other conference schools versus the club route. You're traveling with the middle school program and the middle school team in wrestling. So you're able to gain that kind of camaraderie. You're having those middle school coaches that we already have under their kind of overseeing that and making sure that that program's something that's valuable for those kids. So the other hang up that we had is, where does this open the door then to every other sport in sixth grade wanting to be involved? Talking to Mark Nansky, who did speak at the last meeting, our varsity wrestling coach, we looked at kind of establishing a percentage. So once you hit that certain percentage where, let's say we only have 20 total 7th and 8th grade wrestlers, but there's 6 sixth graders that want to wrestle. So that's something where we'd have to look at kind of finding that happy medium on a number where we would then allow sixth graders to participate in middle school wrestling. That's what other schools are doing as well, where they're not saying, oh, you're in sixth grade, you want to play basketball, now you can. It was looking at a sport that needs the help in terms of participation and numbers. Wrestling was one of them. For some schools, it's volleyball. It's not us, right? Because we have 8 different teams already, so we're good there. We don't need to look at adding sixth grade to sports like that, or for football, for example, or basketball. So it's kind of looking at those sports where you look at a national trend line and where participation is going. Does sixth graders being involved, does that impact anything financially? I said no on that. So our biggest wrinkle is the transportation piece and trying to make sure that if you're a sixth grader, you can get to where you need to without it being a big headache for that parent, right? When now they're having to shuttle their student around. There's already the school provided transportation of the bus. If there's a wrestling meet at Beaver Dam, they're traveling with that team already. There's no rule in our middle school conference that says, hey, you can't have sixth graders participate. In fact, we have multiple schools, like I said, that are already having sixth graders come here and wrestle our 7th and 8th graders because they allow that. So it's really kind of a decision on how comfortable we are with saying, we're going to allow it in this sport, but not in this sport. If your numbers are great enough to support plenty of teams, we can't feasibly add another grade to, again, a sport like volleyball or basketball.
Is there ever, I imagine there could be conflicts when you're playing other schools, even though they allow it, like, do the rules vary from year to year based on maybe the talent that's coming up, and it's like, oh, I want this one, and it fits within it this year, you know, like some kind of, we're gonna bend the rules to other schools, like, wait a minute, that person shouldn't be here.
So because of
what recourse do you have?
Sure. So are you talking like specifically for wrestling?
Well, I'm generalizing for all of it, so yeah, let's just go with wrestling right now.
Sure. So again, for wrestling, you have to fit that certain weight class. You could have a sixth grader that is a little bit more developed and ready to wrestle somebody that's an 8th grader or a smaller 8th grader, and where it lines up in that. In the middle school, wrestling is unique in that it really involves the coaches communicating ahead of times and setting lineups to each other to make sure that that fair play is happening. They're not just rolling out an 8th grader to go crush a 7th or 6th grader just so you can say, hey, they're 10-0 or whatever it is. So those coaches do a very good job of making sure that it's fair and equal. Like that, I've not had one complaint where it's, hey, you guys are continuously sending your top level wrestlers to wrestle our 7th or 6th graders or vice versa.
And if we did enter into making sure that we're consistent with what we're doing so that there's no question that.
Yeah, I agree.
The other thing is the co-curricular handbook thing that I don't think you mentioned. Now you have students that they're following a totally different one.
Yep.
I'm guessing that if they're going to be in this, they are now following.
Yeah. So we kind of talked about the letter grade system. It doesn't exist unless for a 6th grader, they don't have an A, B, and C grade assigned at the intermediate school, but the middle school does. So we would have to add some sort of disclaimer or note to the handbook going forward on what are we using for that 6th grader? What's their grade period that's evaluated? So like the high school, middle school, we use quarter 1, the 9-week progress report grade. That determines eligibility. what does that look like from an intermediate school standpoint? You know, Tim and Jeff both were in agreement with supporting this. We just kind of need to narrow down what that looks like, because you can't say, well, I had 2 Fs, so I can't participate. You're not getting Fs. What is the measuring stick that's used for academic eligibility now for a 6th grader?
So is this something that needs to be approved eventually by the board?
Well, yeah,
Eventually,
yes.
but not today.
No.
This is informational.
This would be for the following winter.
Sure.
So we have time to kind of vet that process and look at what the grades would need to be. I wanted to bring this back because I know there is continued support for it. That's not gonna go away. I said I would give an update on it. And I said I would ask for input from all the other schools, and I have all that data and information. It's just kind of that hard line of saying, well, we want 6th graders to participate in this sport now. It's just saying you have enough right now to support your programs. It doesn't need to be added. Again, we're trying to keep this middle school sports. There's just certain sports where it does become a little bit more unique. Wrestling is one of them, because of that ability to wrestle up, or, well, yeah, wrestle up if I'm a 6th grader to a 7th grader.
Well, thank you for providing that information, that update. Are we needing to schedule a future meeting, or can we wait to do that?
Probably wait.
Okay.
I think it's traditionally where I come back to you and do winter participation report. So I just look back at years past meetings, kind of went off a general time. Winter sports will wrap up in mid to March, so I'm assuming that would be like late March, April. I probably need April before I have all this data back from all conference meetings and things like that to be able to include participation numbers and academic achievements and athletic achievements too.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
We just need a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.